Okay, in this video what we're going to show you now, we're going to go over how to take the carburetor apart and clean the carburetor. A lot of times one of the problems I see, bike that sits for a while, if it's got gas in the carburetor, one of the problems you see is mainly the pilot jet gets stopped up. So it's something that, you know, at that point the only way to fix it is to take the carburetor apart, go through everything, clean it out. It's something that really should be done occasionally anyway, just to go over the condition of the carburetor, make sure everything's okay. So we've already, on the last video that we did, we went over how to remove the carburetor off the bike and then get it back on. So now what we're going to do in this video is show you how to get the carburetor apart, what parts you need to clean, and a few things that you need to look out for. So it's really a simple job. You know, Phillips head screwdriver, a couple of small wrenches, small flathead screwdriver, and the carburetor comes apart real easy. So what we'll go over now is you know, how to get it apart, kind of what each part does, and you know, just go over how to clean the thing, make sure it goes back on the bike, everything runs good. So we'll cover that right now, and hopefully we can help you out. Okay, once you got the carburetor off, the first step is going to be to remove the bowl. There's 4 screws on you know, all the key and 4-stroke carburetors. There's basically 4 screws that hold the bowl on. What we do is we're going to take those out. There's 1 screw that holds your idle speed adjustment. You want to keep that in mind. Remember where that goes. On the other side of the bowl, underneath the other 2 screws, there's just a still aluminum piece. Basically it holds your carburetor vent lines. Just kind of remember where those go. Yeah, each bike's going to be a little bit different on that, depending on the manufacturer where they want to put those. But small little, just a small little separator to hold the hoses, the vent lines in place. We got the 4 screws out. From there you can take the bowl out. You've got the bowl off the carburetor. What you've got now, you've got a little plastic baffle that's held in by the main jet. The main jet is a 6mm. We can take the main jet out. Actually, we tried to take the main jet out, but the whole nozzle and everything's coming out. Not a big deal. That needs to come out anyway to be cleaned. So that comes out. What we'll do now is we'll separate the main jet and the nozzle. Take those 2 apart. Right here's your main jet. Main jet controls pretty much 3/4 to wide open throttle. That controls the amount of fuel going through the carburetor. The other thing, once we get the main jet and the nozzle out of the way, the bowl baffle comes out. From there we have the pilot jet, which is back here on the back side. It's on the engine side of the carburetor. Small flat blade screwdriver, and we're going to thread that out. The pilot jet is generally that's the jet that gives the most trouble. It's got a real small passage, so it's really easy to clog the pilot jet. There's your pilot jet. We're going to go through and clean that out. The next jet, this is actually the start jet. This is something that most people, there's really usually no need to change this, but we definitely want to take it out and clean it. The start jet controls the amount of fuel that goes through the choke system. So you know, it's real important for that to be clean. At this point there's a pin that holds the float in. Take the pin out and then just lift the float up. The float and the needle will come off with it. So that's what regulates the amount of fuel that's in the fuel bowl. From there we want to take the fuel screw out. What I do before I take it out is turn it in and count the number of turns. There's 1/2, 1, 1/2, about 1 3/4. So now we've counted that, we're going to take the fuel screw out. One thing to be really careful with on the fuel screw, there's a spring. Oh, and this doesn't happen very often. It all came out together. Usually you have to dig these pieces out. There's the spring on the fuel screw. Then there's a small washer and then a small O-ring. Be 100% positive you've got those out. Without those parts, you will have a problem. So that's got the bottom half of the carburetor. We're going to turn it over and pull the choke knob out next. Okay, on your choke knob, basically a 14mm wrench. The nut on this thing is plastic, so be really careful with it. Just break it loose, should thread right out with your fingers. So we're going to pull that out. Next is going to be the slide. We're going to pull the slide out of the carburetor. It takes an Allen wrench for that. Okay, we've got the two Allen screws out of the cover for the slide. You'll take that off. What you'll find is the slide works on an arm. To get the slide out, you've got to take the Phillips head screw that holds the arm in place. Be very careful. You can strip the screw out, so be very careful when you go to pull this out. This has to come out to get the slide out, and really to clean the carburetor. It really should come out. So we're going to pull that out, and got that screw out. Now at this point it gets a little bit tricky. What you'll want to do is roll the slide up. As the slide comes out of the carburetor, you've got rollers on each side. What you want to do is watch that fairly close. Slide the carburetor, or take the slide out, take it out, being careful not to lose those rollers. These things, they do come off, as you can see. One of them's got a bearing on them, a couple of them's got bearings on them, some of them don't. So just kind of pay attention to how they go. Another thing that's really important is the vacuum plate on the carburetor. It comes off. There is a small rubber seal on the back side. Do not clean this with carburetor. It can damage that seal and will cause problems. If you notice, the slide goes on one way. The hole should go at the bottom of the slide on the end with the needle. One of the common mistakes that I see, people have the slide off. They'll put it on upside down, and it sort of fits, but it's not right. So make sure you notice how that goes on, and you definitely want to get that back on in the right direction, or it's going to cause you some problems. So we've got that done. Got that apart. I'm going to lay that to the side. Make sure you keep your work area real clean, because you don't want any dirt down in here. Next up, there's a leak. The leak jet is down here in the bowl of the carburetor. I generally just, I've got the thing apart. I'll go ahead and pull it out. It takes a real small flat blade screwdriver, and you got to be really careful with this one. It can be kind of tricky to get out. We'll pull that out, and the leak jet is another thing. You want to blow that out. This controls the amount of fuel that is pumped into the carburetor, into the engine by the accelerator pump. So we've got that apart. Next thing is going to be, this is on the bottom side of the fuel bowl, is the carburetor diaphragm. We're going to take, there's 3 screws on that. We're going to take that apart, and I'll show you how all that comes apart and goes back together. Okay, we've got the 3 screws out of the accelerator pump cover. As we take the last one off, want to make sure you keep a little pressure on the cover itself. It does have a spring under there, and it will come off easy, and raise that off. There's a couple O-rings. There's one O-ring, it's just a small O-ring here, and a small O-ring over on the body of the bolt itself. There's also a spring on here. Spring doesn't matter, it can go either way, so you don't have to worry about that. Take the spring out, and this is your accelerator pump diaphragm. We'll take that out. We'll clean everything there. I'm going to take this O-ring out and lay it to the side. You got to be really careful, or you can actually you can blow these things out and lose them. Accelerator pump's not going to work if you don't have the O-ring sealed up. You're going to have a leak. So we've got that out. We've got the one out of the accelerator pump cover. And basically the carburetor is disassembled now. What we're going to do is we're going to clean it up really good, and we're going to put it back together. Okay, at this point we've got the carburetor cleaned up. Yeah, just regular carburetor cleaner. Spray it down really good. Make sure you blow compressed air through all the passages. Your pilot jet, start jet, main jet passages, your inlet valve. Over here on your hot start and your choke, make sure you blow through those to make sure there's no dirt in there. Next, go ahead, spray some carburetor cleaner through all your jets, blow those out with compressed air really good, and at that point you're ready to start putting the carburetor back together. What we're going to do first is put the accelerator pump back together. Just the reverse of the way you took it apart. Put the accelerator pump diaphragm back in. It fits down into the carburetor bowl, and so we want to put that back in there. Okay, remember on your accelerator pump there's two ways for this thing to go in there, but there's only one way that'll work right. On this end it's actually got a stop that contacts the bottom of the accelerator pump cover, and it limits the travel of the accelerator pump. So you want to make sure that goes in there right. Put your spring back on, make sure all your O-rings are in place, and then we're going to slide the accelerator pump cover down on it, and put your screws back in. Okay, next up we've got the carburetor bowl. The accelerator pump is back together. Next step is going to be to put the carburetor slide back in. Again, you want to make sure the vacuum plate is on in the right direction with the notched outside down. Alright, make sure you hold the slide so that the vacuum plate doesn't fall off. The vacuum plate goes towards the engine side of the carburetor. Pull these rollers up, watch the wheels on them. These wheels, they shouldn't come off. I've seen a few of them that will. Ease the slide back down into the carburetor, and as it lines up with the rollers, slide the rollers back into place, and it should slide right in. From there you can work the slide back and forth with your fingers. We want to make sure we put this screw back into the throttle shaft, and then the slide will be done. Okay, we've got the slide back together. Now we're going to flip the carburetor over. First we're going to put in the pilot jet. Pilot jet goes on the engine side of the carburetor, and goes in right beside the main jet. Slide the pilot jet in. Tighten it down. You don't have to get too crazy with it, but you want to make sure it's not going to back itself back out. Alright, from there we're going to put the start jet back in. And next we're going to make sure you get your bowl baffle in. There's only one way this thing will go, so you can't get it on there backwards. Slide the baffle back in place. Then we're going to put our main nozzle. The needle's sticking out through there, so you're going to have to slide that down over the needle. And then we're going to use an 8mm socket and a nut driver, and tighten that down. Again, don't need it too tight, but you want it snug. You don't want it coming out. And next you're going to put the main jet in. Slide that right in, and that's a 6mm. Just snug it down, and that's got your jets back in. Next we're going to put the carburetor float back in. Okay, to put the float back in, we're going to put the inlet needle assembly back on to the little tab that it goes on. Slides right on. From there, you just hold the carburetor and slide the needle down into the hole, and we'll put the pin back in the float bowl. You have to line the float up and slide the pin in. At this point we want to check the float level. Most of these carburetors, as you can see here, the needle is spring loaded, so it'll actually go farther than just closed. You slowly rotate the carburetor over, and once the float sits down, it should be level with the bottom, the sealing surface of the carburetor. That's generally where your float height should be. At this point, we've got one more jet left over. This is the leak jet. This is the one that goes down into the bowl of the carburetor. So we're going to put that back in. And we're ready to put the carburetor bowl back in. Again, one of the things that you just got to do is really important, is make sure you keep everything perfectly clean. You don't want any trash getting into the carburetor. So we've got the leak jet back in. Carburetor bowl only goes on one way. Watch your accelerator pump rod, and it actually goes into the hole on the bowl of the carburetor. Slide that together, and it should fit right back down. From there we put our screws back in, and we've got a few other things to do, but then we'll have the carburetor back together. Okay, we've got the bowl back on the carburetor. Make sure you get, your idle speed adjustment goes over here. Make sure you get that back in the right location. And then your guides for the carburetor vent lines, make sure you get those back on. Next thing is going to be to slide the fuel screw back into the carburetor. Slide that down in there. And if you remember earlier, the fuel screw was set at 1 round and 3/4, round and 3/4 out. So what you want to do is turn it in. Don't crank this thing down, or you'll damage the end of it. Just till it lightly seats. And on this one, we're going to back it out. There's 1/2, 1/2, and 3/4. Next, we're going to put the choke knob back into the carburetor. Just feed that in there. Run it down with your fingers, and 14mm wrench. Snug it down. Again, this thing's plastic, so you don't want to over tighten it. You'll strip it out. Carburetor's back together, and we're ready to put it back on the bike. So that's all there is to it. Really not that hard, and yeah, it's something that needs to be done every now and then just to make sure the carburetor's in good shape. So hopefully this helped you out. You've learned how to clean your own carburetor. Really not that hard. There's a lot of pieces in there, but take your time, lay everything out. Shouldn't have any problems doing it.